a Tier 1 Indian city. I was told that if I do everything right, study hard, get good grades, get into a good school, a good college, and finally start earning good money, I will get the life I wanted. And I did all of that. I followed all the rules. But I was shocked when I realized that all this was not enough. Even if you earn a good salary and make a decent life, you cannot escape reality.
In Andheri, a Mercedes floated placidly in shin-deep floodwater.
Oh, I can't even walk on the street.
People navigated their inexpensive bikes and small cars around the luxury sedan.
About 1.7 million lives are lost every year in India because of pollution. That's 18% of the deaths in India.
The abandoned car seemed to have made its peace with the fact that German engineering is no match for Indian urban planning.
The reality that if you breathe without a mask here, it's equal to you smoking 17 cigarettes a day. That the time you could have spent with family will be wasted with you sitting in traffic for hours. That people will litter, spit, drive, honk, and shout however they would like, and no one will do anything about it.
Our cities should be a signal of India's potential and growth story.
So why are they always incomplete, always under construction? Why do they give us a pathetic quality of life? And can our salary ever keep up with rising rents, rising inflation, and the super high cost of living? And will we ever be able to escape this brutal reality?
My name is Lavina Kamath, and here's the full disclosure. In February last year, Karnataka's Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar made a statement that instantly upset a lot of people in Bangalore. He said,
Within 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, ಈ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಇರೋಂಥ ಭಗವಂತ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ನಡೆದಾಡೋದು ಏನು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ.
And as it was expected, the backlash was immediate. Many felt it was unfortunate that the minister in charge of the city was admitting helplessness instead of actually outlining immediate solutions to solve the problem. But that comment actually made me curious. Are Bangalore and other Tier 1 Indian cities genuinely too broken to be fixed? Or is this just another excuse to cover up government inaction? But before answering that, let's look at how bad things really are and how much money you are losing by living in these cities. Every year, the TomTom Traffic Index analyzes traffic conditions across more than 500 cities in 62 countries. And according to the most recent report, Bangalore is the third slowest city in the world to drive in. During rush hour, the average speed drops to just 16 kilometers per hour. And that means it takes around 40 minutes to cover only 10 kilometers. You might think it's just time, but here's where it gets costly. According to a study by the Institute for Social and Economic Change in Karnataka, it estimated that traffic congestion cost Bangalore 11.7 billion rupees in lost productive hours just by being stuck in the city's traffic. Now the question is, why does this keep happening? Here's the reality. Bangalore has 1.2 crore registered vehicles. But on major Bangalore traffic corridors, the number of cars that are plying on roads are double or even triple the actual capacity that the roads can handle. So the roads were designed for a city that doesn't exist anymore. A city from 20 years ago. But then, maybe the metro can solve for this. But the problem is, Bangalore's metro has expanded far more slowly than actually needed. Despite launching in 2011, the network has only reached about 97 kilometers with 83 stations. And that has taken us 14 plus years. And the phase 2 expansion has been delayed time and time again. If we continue at the same pace, Bangalore will need 100 more years to be able to build a functional network. But traffic and time is not the only way you're losing money when living in these cities. While you are stuck in traffic, the real financial trap is not on the roads. It's actually where you live. There's a report that claims that many Indians believe that millennials were the last generation to ever be able to afford a house of their own. Now, I want to be clear about something. This is not because of an actual housing shortage. This is because there is a manufactured shortage. And once you understand how that works, you will realize that you have been playing for a system that's deliberately designed to extract your wealth from you. And what's interesting is, it's not that we don't have homes. We actually have the opposite problem. According to Anirock's reports, by the end of 2025, Mumbai alone had around 1.8 lakh unsold residential units. Bangalore had around 65,000 unsold units, and Delhi had close to 90,000. So in total, we have lakhs and lakhs of empty homes. But these homes are not empty because people don't need them, but because prices are completely disconnected from what people actually earn and what they can actually afford. You can see this clearly when you understand the price to income ratio, which tells you how many years of your entire household income it would take for you to be able to buy a home. Now, globally, a price to income ratio of 3 to 6 is considered healthy. Anything above 10 is a serious warning sign of deep affordability stress. Now, look at our tier 1 cities. Bangalore sits at 7.8. Delhi is at 16.9. And Mumbai is at an absurd 31.4, which leaves us with only one option: renting homes. Now, I live in Bangalore and I have seen this for myself. In Whitefield in Bangalore, rents jumped 30 to 40% in a single year, while on the other hand, your salary hikes are still stuck around 9 to 10%. So even if you're receiving appraisals and earning more on paper year on year, your actual purchasing power is actually shrinking because rental pricing is growing faster than your income is. Now, what's surprising is, if there are lakhs of unsold units, why are rents still skyrocketing? Why do landlords have a monopoly when their houses are actually lying empty? The answer to that lies in something called as FSI, which is your floor space index. FSI is basically a cap on how many square feet you can build on any given piece of land. In Bangalore, FSI is typically 2 to 3, which means that if you have 4,000 square feet of a plot, developers can only build 8,000 to 12,000 square feet of total floor space because the cap is 2 to 3. Now, here is also where the politics comes in. When FSI is low, there is artificial scarcity because builders cannot construct more apartments even if they wanted to. It's a clear supply-demand problem. Supply becomes limited, so prices end up inflating. And developers love this because it continues to keep pricing high of their apartments. It keeps demand outstripping supply, and because of which it keeps landlords in power. Now, do you know who controls FSI? The government. And guess who has close relationships with these real estate developers? The same politicians who are setting the FSI limits. This is how our system works. And meanwhile, working people like you are paying 40 to 50% of your income just for inflated rent in a city with thousands of empty apartments. This is your housing tax. You have shelter, but you don't have ownership. Now, you can still work around that by compromising on your living standards, but there is one problem that will hit you no matter which tier 1 city you live in, and there is no real way to avoid it. And that is medical inflation. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for today, Zoho Workplace. You'll see through this video that most workplace challenges come down to one thing: accountability and collaboration. And that is exactly what Zoho Workplace helps us solve. Zoho Workplace is an all-in-one suite that brings your email, chats, documents, meetings, and team collaboration all together under your own brand and domain. It's built in India, trusted globally, and even used between millions of employees. That says a lot about its reliability and privacy standards. Unlike other tools, you don't have to switch everything at once. With its hybrid setup, you can use Zoho alongside Gmail or Outlook, and you can move your teams gradually. Plus, you only pay for what you use with flexible mix and match pricing for different user needs. And whenever you need help, Zoho's 24/7 support team of real humans, not bots, is always available by email, chat, or call. And if you want a secure, ad-free, and affordable workplace suite built for modern Indian teams, check out Zoho Workplace using the link in the description or the pinned comment below and start your free trial today. Now back to our video. Zerodha's co-founder Nitin Kamath put out a tweet saying India is just one medical bill away from poverty. And it makes sense when you actually look at the numbers. India has the highest medical inflation rate in all of Asia, touching around 14%. And that is already higher than your average annual salary hike of 8 to 10%. This means health insurance in India is no longer optional. And yet, 71% of workers still pay healthcare expenses out of their own pocket, while only 15% receive health insurance support from their employers. But even for the people that have insurance, things are getting worse. By 2026, which is this year, health insurance premiums in India are expected to rise by 8 to 12% for individual plans and over 11% for employer-provided plans. And the increase in pricing is because of continuous medical inflation and a massive rise in respiratory illnesses specifically, especially in polluted urban cities. Speaking of polluted urban cities, our capital city, Delhi NCR, is the worst. Right now, and I'm serious, kids in Delhi are developing lungs that look like 40-year-old smokers, except that they have never smoked a cigarette in their life, they're just breathing air. And in 2022 alone, 17 lakh Indians died from air pollution because the air we are breathing is not clean enough. That is one death every 18 seconds, not doing anything but just from breathing. Hospitals across India are now seeing something unprecedented: lung cancer patients who have never smoked or touched a cigarette, and the air itself is giving them cancer. So the health cost of living in these cities is real and it's immediate because kids are developing asthma, adults are coughing instantly, hospital visits for respiratory issues are skyrocketing, and medical costs at the same time are going up while your life expectancy is going down. But you can't buy your way out of this. You can buy an air purifier, but it only works inside your home. You still have to step outside, you still have to breathe the air. So what do? You buy a car so you can move outside, avoiding the air. But that creates more traffic and that creates more pollution. It's a never-ending vicious cycle. Then comes water. Now, once you've sat in traffic, breathing toxic air, let's talk about what you drink when you get home. In Delhi, 99% of groundwater has dried up and the Yamuna remains heavily polluted, forcing all residents to rely on water tankers and RO purifiers. In summer 2024, the water crisis in Bangalore was so severe that the water tanker mafia became the primary utility provider. They control supply of water and thus they set prices for water. The public water bill is 500 rupees a month, but what you get is almost nothing. The private tanker bill is 5,000 to 15,000 rupees a month. So you're paying taxes for water infrastructure that doesn't work, then you're paying a cartel 10 times the government rate to actually get water. So if you add tanker water, filtration systems, storage, maintenance, and pure government failure, you end up spending 27 to 64,000 rupees a year on water alone for something that should have cost you nothing because you already pay taxes. Electricity is not very different either. Power outages force people to buy inverters, batteries, or generators, adding another 10,000 to 30,000 rupees a year. So the system works like this. The government builds infrastructure but doesn't maintain it. So essential services for survival, water, air, electricity, all end up failing and you are forced to buy private solutions, and now you end up being doubly taxed and paying twice. So we come back to the same question. Why is it that the cities we live in are extracting wealth, time, and our health at every level? Let me show you something. Vietnam's per capita GDP is roughly equal to or even lower than most Indian cities. Yet, if you visit Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, you will be shocked. They have clean roads, no potholes, moving traffic, and working public transit. So why can't Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore figure this out for us? The answer lies in how these cities were built and developed in the first place. If you look at Bangalore, Bangalore started as a small, well-planned city during British times. Lakes, parks, everything. But in the late 1900s, things changed very quickly when the IT boom happened. Suddenly, millions of people came looking for jobs, and because of this rapid growth, the city did not get enough time to plan properly. Buildings, roads, residential areas were all constructed very quickly and without clear coordination or planning. And something similar happened with Mumbai and Delhi as well. Just like Bangalore drew in tech firms and engineers, Mumbai concentrated finance, media, and ambition in a few square kilometers, and Delhi pulled together politics, bureaucracy, and everything in between. Now, this is the concept of agglomeration economy. In economics, agglomeration is the stuff of dreams. When firms, workers, ideas, everything cluster densely together, they actually reap positive rewards of shared infrastructure, pooled labor, and innovation. And this is why cities like New York, London, Singapore, all of them work, because dense cities create innovation and wealth. But here is where Indian cities got it wrong. For some time now, several Tier 1 cities in India seem to have been following the same agglomeration logic. But the issue is, agglomeration is not about piling more people and stuffing them into cities. It's also about the quality of interactions. Urban productivity grows when people can collaborate, move, and learn from each other. However, if commutes start exceeding 2 hours and housing costs start eating into half your income and the air you're breathing becomes poison, those benefits disappear. A 2024 study on the municipal performance of Indian cities shows just how unprepared most cities in India are to handle growth properly. Out of 152 Indian municipalities studied, about 113 municipalities claimed that they have qualified town planners, but in reality, do you know how many had it? Only 16. So the truth is, planning is fragmented, it's outdated, and it's inconsistent, and companies and skilled workers are still clustering in cities, but they're doing it on top of failing infrastructure, poor planning, and rising environmental stress. But then, when you look outside, how come other world cities like New York, Singapore, London, how did they work on their agglomeration logic, but we couldn't? The answer is simple: accountability. To understand that, let's take the example of New York. When Zoran Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City, one of the first things he did was issue executive orders on day one, directly targeting the city's housing crisis. And that's what a mayor does. They are the political leader of the city, they're responsible for it, and when the city fails, people vote them out. So there is accountability. But here's what's different in India. Cities are not actually run by elected mayors, they're run by state governments. As a result, they answer to a chief minister that's sitting 200 kilometers away in the state capital and not to you. And here's their incentive structure. The CM's voter base is primarily rural. Rural voters outnumber us urban voters. So the political calculus is simple: keep the rural areas happy and extract from the cities. The taxes you pay go to the state government, and the state gives it back as a grant to municipalities, which means the city is permanently dependent and can never be independent. But because Indian cities do not have their own money, they can't fix anything. The state keeps it for rural welfare schemes that buy them votes, and the city ends up remaining neglected. So when you ask, why don't they fix the roads? Why don't they clean the air? The answer is simple: they just don't have to. They're not incentivized to. And that's why most people in Bangalore today can't even name their city's mayor. And that's not because people don't care, it's because Indian mayors don't even have real power. Unlike mayors in global cities, Indian mayors are denied even basic executive authority. They cannot plan the city, approve budgets, or direct civic agencies in any meaningful way. According to the CAG, urban local governments have no control over 75% of the powers that are constitutionally supposed to be given to them. On paper, local bodies like the MCD, BMC, BBMP are all responsible for cities' management. But in reality, the control sits with the state governments. Think about it this way. If your mayor controlled your water supply, your garbage collection, housing approvals, public transport, law enforcement, you would vote for them very carefully. You would know exactly who to blame when things are not working out. Instead, what we have is a constant blame game. So when everyone is responsible, no one actually is responsible. And this is where you come in. When mayor elections have no point, when mayors have no real power, when governments keep passing blame, people start to realize something: that no one is ever going to take accountability. And that is when they stop expecting their cities to work and they move into private gated societies. They start relying on home deliveries because they can't walk on their roads. They install air purifiers because they can't breathe air outside, water filters, backup generations, all of it, and opt out. We've done it ourselves. Our company moved from Indiranagar to Hebbal. Not for ideology, but for practical reasons of cheaper office rent, cheaper housing, better ROI. Employees avoid wasting hours and hours just sitting in traffic trying to get to work, and it just made sense. But on the other hand, no matter how much you privatize your life, it still doesn't fix the city you live in. The frustrating part is that it's not like these problems are impossible to solve. They're just not being prioritized in Bangalore, Delhi, or Bombay. But some tier 2 cities in India have figured it out. They have shown that better urban management is possible. Indore, for example, wasn't always clean. In 2014, it ranked 149th on the Clean City Index. By 2016, it had climbed to 25th number, and in 2017, it ranked first. Until date, they have kept that position. Ahmedabad and Surat didn't magically fix traffic either. They invested in basic but effective systems like bus rapid transit with dedicated lanes, predictable buses, and integrated ticketing with decent last mile connections. Chandigarh is one of the best planned cities in the world. More than design, what mattered was that people believed the city could function and they behaved accordingly. What's clear is Indian cities, especially tier 1 cities, can get better, but it only works when governance is held accountable and people stop solving problems individually and start demanding collective fixes. My name is Lavina Kamath, and this was your Full Disclosure. This is a tier 1 Indian city.